Hey family, my name is Sean Harness and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to get into this conversation. I've been wanting to do this video for quite some time. I want to talk to you guys about some of the things that you're possibly doing or not doing with your personal finances that are keeping you in a bad space. What I've researched is that less than 40% of the people in the United States have less than $1,000 in their bank accounts. I find that alarming, surprising. And today I want to talk to you guys about some of the things that I've learned in my corporate career, because I've worked in the corporate space probably, I want to say about 14, 15 years. I've had a chance to learn a lot of the best practices as it relates to budgeting, as it relates to investing. Stay to the end of the video if you want to get this free game on how to keep your personal finances in check. Let's get it. Hey family, welcome back to my channel. Again, my name is Sean Harness and thank you for checking out my channel. So I wanted to take some time to jump into the conversation again about money, because obviously this is a money channel, but a lot of times we break into those lifestyle elements and we talk about those things. But today I want to get back to that general sense of talking about money and personal finance. And before we jump in, hey, let me ask you, do y'all want to hear about personal finance things that I've learned, especially working in corporate America? Do you want to hear more about lifestyle? Do you want to hear more about relationships? Let me know in the comments. So the first thing that I've learned, what happens a lot of times is people tend to pay themselves last. And honestly, this is not the way to do it. You need to pay yourself first. When you get your paycheck, really it relates to those elements that come out automatically, and then you move on to everything else. So from a savings perspective, your savings should be about 20%. There's a portion in there that's going to be your 401k. There's a portion in there that may be a Roth IRA. There's a portion in there that may be emergency fund, right? But essentially that all needs to come out automatically first before you start to move into paying other things and moving into buying other things. So next I want to just jump into the conversation a little bit more about the emergency fund. So I mentioned about paying yourself first. You shouldn't really be doing anything else until you have an emergency fund built up. You shouldn't be buying anything big or extravagant. You shouldn't be doing anything that relates to paying down debt, investing. The goal here should be for you to build up at least 3 to 6 months of your savings, right? Doing that in a separate bank account from your regular personal bank account that you use on a day-to-day basis. Typically, you should focus on one that has a high yield interest rate. Those usually come with credit unions. You building up that emergency fund, a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, you know what, well, I don't really have a lot of money left at the end of when I pay for everything to actually put money into an emergency fund. So if that's the case, start off small. At least try and get over that hump of, let's say, just build up $1,000. So if that means you got to put $100 aside every time you get paid or once a month just to build up $1,000, let's focus on something small and more realistic before we move into that piece of building up that 3 to 6 months, because it could be a whole financial overhaul that we can get in, that we can talk about, probably not on this video, but a different video, that's going to allow you to build that 3 to 6 months up, because it can be done. Another piece is that a lot of people have a challenge with paying down bad debt, right? And notice I said the word bad debt. There's some good debt that you can have. A lot of us have good debt, which relates to, let's say it is student loans, or let's say that it is going to be your house. Really things that kind of can turn that debt into an asset versus a liability. Again, an asset is something that can essentially make you more money over time. A liability is something that's essentially just debt, right? So if we talk about the bad debt, one part of the bad debt can be most things retail. So I told you about having and making big extravagant purchases all the time, going on big trips all the time. If it's, you are essentially focusing on going on that big trip. So instead of going to, let's say, Chicago or Houston or Miami, you're taking a trip to Dubai, somewhere where you know it's going to cost you some coins to get there and it's going to cost you some coins to be able to really have a good time. If I can't buy it using cash, I'm not going to buy it using credit. Us having our finances in line, us having that emergency fund, us having things really set up before we start to really try and use credit cards. One thing I can tell you though is that if you get the right credit card, there are some incentives that you can gain from using that credit card versus using cash, right? So if you use cash, you don't really get incentives. But if you use credit, you know, there are some incentives essentially that you can get, some points. I mean, for travel or points for your business if you have a business. Next I mentioned was I feel like is very important is that you really have a chance to look at what your income is and what your expenses are. This is really getting back to you getting and writing down a budget. Personally, if you know how to use Microsoft Excel, I would use that because there's ways that you can add everything up and write it down. But again, I'm an engineer, so I mean, I do stuff like that. I'm nerdy like that, right? But if you're not trying to use Microsoft Excel, that's cool. Literally get a piece of paper out and write down how much money you have coming in. Also, it's important for you to write down how much money you have going out. And when you subtract the two, that's going to get you your net income, right? So if I make $1,000 per month, right? Working wherever I work, I make $1,000 per month. If my expenses for the month are $500, I have $500 left. That's my net income. Once you have net income, this is where you can put that back in. You can tweak it. You can add more to savings. You can potentially pay off more debt. You can think about investing, things of that nature. The goal is to have more net income because with more net income, you have more power. And as we get into more of the conversation, I'm going to talk to you guys about ways to get yourself more net income. So next I want to talk to you guys about mindset because mindset is also very important. As you are looking at your finances, right, there's going to get to a point where you look at your income, you look at your expenses, you've done everything you've done to tweak your budget. You can't really at this point make any more money in your career. You know, you have a boss or you have a company that ain't trying to pay you no more money, right? And then you have a place where you've looked at how much you pay for rent or how much you pay for your mortgage. You looked at what you pay for your car note, what you pay for insurance. Kind of seems like you've done everything that you can to shave off money and save money and do everything you can, right? I'm here to tell you, there's actually more you can do. So this is where the shift comes in. You need to just make some changes. There's two things you can do. You can either increase your income or you can reduce your expenses. But now we're getting much more strategic. So if we're talking about increasing our income, this is where you can do things like go back to school, get more education, go get a trade, having stair-step goals, basically, where you started somewhere, you got some experience, and then you found something where you can build on that experience and get more education, get more knowledge, right? So because when you start to pair a lot of the knowledge and the education and a lot of the theory with the actual practical knowledge, you actually become much more powerful in whatever realm you go into as it relates to working for someone else, right? You could start a business. You can find something you're really good at, put a price to it, right? And charge someone a price to solve a problem. You can do a side hustle, right? You can do Airbnb. You can potentially do Uber. You can do Uber Eats. There's a lot of ways that you can add more income. Now, as we're related to expenses, from the expense perspective, I mean, you know, from this place, sometimes there's an even bigger shift that you need to do. And I'll probably get into this a lot more in a different video. But this is related to, let's say we're looking at some of the biggest expenses, our living expenses for our home, right? So our mortgage or our rent, maybe you need to move. Maybe you need to have a place that has less amenities, or maybe you need to move overall and shift to a place that's different geography. Maybe you need to move to a new state. because there are some states, say California and New York, no shade, I love both of those places, but they're very expensive, right? Maybe you need to move to some place that's a little bit less expensive so it's not breaking the bank. You know, another thing we do as people quite often is we spend a lot of money. I know myself, my demographic as a black person, I know that African Americans spend probably more than anybody else. That's why we start to look at a lot of the statistics, and we start to look at a lot of companies that really just follow a lot of these elements, right? So advertising agencies and companies like that, marketing agencies, they're really looking to see what black people are doing and where they're spending money because we spend the most money, right? So with that being said, I feel like in general, as a people, we need to start spending less money on things that are not bringing us money back, because that goes back into the conversation that I was having about really having a purchase of an asset versus a purchase of a liability. An asset is having something that is going to bring you money back. So next, really, I want to talk to you guys about paying down debt. So personally, I like the idea of using something called the snowball effect. So we've talked about saving money, right? We talked about potentially putting things into assets versus liabilities. But in terms of actually paying down debt, I like the idea of the snowball effect. Snowball effect is the idea that you're going to pay down things that have a smaller impact or smaller interest rate. What that's going to allow me to do is a couple of things. First, I'm paying down the debt, right? Secondly, it's going to allow me to feel much better because that was a small goal that I had a chance to tackle and get over and complete. Now I can move on to the second credit card. So next, I'm going to tell you a very unconventional thing that most people won't tell you. Don't just focus on just savings. Hey, we talked about things that will allow you to save, let's say 3 to 6 months of your personal expenses. We also talked a little bit about 401k, maybe Roth IRA, things that you're doing based on your employer to try and save money. But one thing that we do very quite often that is keeping a lot of us poor is that we're focusing a lot of our extra money just on savings and not on putting that money into a vehicle. Vehicle meaning an asset. An asset is something like a stock. It's something like, say, an investment, like an Airbnb. Basically, you have something where you invest money, and instead of just putting that money in and losing it, you're putting that money in and you're making the money back. When you put money into a savings account, you're probably going to get like 0.0023% that you're going to save, but you're not really getting those bigger returns. You're not getting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% back from that money that you're throwing into a savings account. All right, guys. So another topic I want to talk about is taxes. Don't underestimate how powerful it is. First lesson to keep in mind is the more money you make, the more you will be taxed. Let me make a disclaimer here though. As I'm talking about taxes, I'm not telling you not to pay your taxes. What I'm telling you to do is just to get smarter about it, because the people who are wealthy are very smart as it relates to taxes, right? Now we can get into the conversation about tax shelters. So we're talking about things like starting a business, but we have retirement accounts, we got real estate, you know, ways that you're jumping into some of those savings accounts that come into your 401k or your Roth IRA, things like that, that your employer has, those employer type benefits that come into play, ways that you can really reduce how much money you're being taxed as it relates to your personal finances. Hey guys, thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found value in it, make sure you like it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and also make sure you share with someone you feel that can benefit from the information. Until then, I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out.